Welcome to Copilot Podcasts. A 75-year-old man, a 25-year-old wife, a newborn baby, the fulfillment of their dreams, according to the play itself. And then, on the drive home from the hospital, a crash. Both parents dead at the scene. The joy doesn't even get a full scene before it's gone. Today, we're cracking open Joseph Nabugwu's play, 10 Children and One, Between Orphania and Lady Pumpkin, a short, sharp, independently published episodic drama that packs social commentary on age gap marriages, power, identity, and routine into under 40 pages. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the play's structure and central situation, what it's really saying about who gets to have an identity and who doesn't, and why its central character Nicky might be one of the most quietly radical figures in contemporary drama. My co-host has been deep in this text, and I want to start right at the beginning. Set the scene for us.
So, the play is set in Middle England. That's the first thing to hold on to. It's not some abstract fantasy world, even though Amazon actually lists it under science fiction and fantasy. It's grounded. A 75-year-old man and his 25-year-old wife have a child together. That child is described as bringing them joy, a fulfillment of their dreams. And then, as you said, on the way home from the hospital, crash. Both parents are pronounced dead at the scene.
And that's where the play actually begins, in a way. Exactly. The tragedy is the setup, not the climax. What follows is the real drama, 10 children left in a place called Magaland and one child in a place called Little Pumpkin, all under the care of a character named Nicky. And Nicky is where everything gets interesting.
Okay, before we get to Nicky, because I do want to spend real time there, can you just give us the structural bones of this thing? Because it's described as an episodic play with 3 acts and many scenes. That's a specific choice.
It is, and the episodic structure is doing real work here. An episodic play doesn't follow a single tight narrative arc. It moves through a series of scenes or episodes that build a cumulative picture. Think of it less like a thriller and more like a mosaic. Each scene adds a tile. And according to the Amazon description, the play is, quote, inspired by the many events associated with contrasts in society. So the structure itself is designed to hold contrast, to put different social realities side by side.
And the title is literally doing that. Between Orphania and Lady Pumpkin. 2 worlds. 2 poles.
Right. And those place names, Orphania and Lady Pumpkin, are fascinating. They're not realistic English place names. They have this almost fairy tale quality. Orphania has orphan right there in the root. And Lady Pumpkin has this slightly absurdist, almost Roald Dahl energy. But the play is not a fairy tale. It's using that slightly heightened symbolic geography to talk about very real social dynamics.
That's such a good catch. The names are doing symbolic heavy lifting.
And then there's Magaland, where Nicky oversees the 10 children, versus Little Pumpkin, where the 1 child is. So you have this numerical contrast built right into the geography. 10 versus 1. The many versus the singular. And Nicky is caught between them.
Okay, so let's talk about the social commentary layer, because the play description is pretty explicit about this. It says the play, quote, pokes fun at the way society reacts to age differences in marriages, the powerful and the submissive, identity and non-entity. That's a lot of targets for a 38-page play.
It is, and I think pokes fun is actually a really deliberate phrase. It's not condemns or critiques, it's pokes fun. There's a satirical edge here. The play is aware that society's reaction to a 75-year-old man marrying a 25-year-old woman is itself a performance. People have opinions, they judge, they react, and Nabugwu is holding that up and going, look at this, look at how we behave.
And the age gap itself, 50 years between husband and wife, that's not incidental. That's the engine of the social commentary.
Completely, because the age gap is where all the other themes converge. The powerful and the submissive. Who holds power in a marriage with that kind of age differential? Identity and non-entity. Whose identity gets recognized? Whose gets erased? These aren't abstract questions. They're embedded in the specific situation the play sets up.
And then both of them die, and suddenly those questions get transferred onto Nicky.
Exactly. And that's the structural genius of it. The parent's story, the age gap marriage, the social judgment, the joy of the child, that's almost a prologue. The real play is what happens after. Who takes care of these children, and what does that caregiving cost the person doing it?
Which brings us to Nicky's monologue, because the Amazon listing actually quotes it directly, and it stopped me cold when I read it.
It's remarkable. Let me read it because it deserves to be heard in full. Quote, "Every morning I wake the children up from bed. I wash them, brush and dress them up. I feed them. They play. I keep watch over them. In the afternoon, I wash them again. I feed them. I make them sleep so that I can attend to other duties. In the evening, I wake them up the third time. I wash them. I feed them. They go to bed at night. I watch over them. I oversee 10 children in Magaland and 1 in Little Pumpkin. I'm tired of this never-ending job. My name is Nicky and I want to be called that and be me."
That last line, my name is Nicky and I want to be called that and be me, that hits differently after everything that came before it.
It does. And notice what the monologue is doing structurally. It's repetitive by design. Morning, wash, feed, watch. Afternoon, wash, feed, sleep. Evening, wash, feed, bed. 3 times a day, every day. The language itself enacts the exhaustion it's describing. You feel the grind of it just reading it.
So the form is the content. The repetition in the writing mirrors the routine regime the play is critiquing.
Precisely. And the play is described explicitly as, quote, "a play on routine regime." That phrase is doing double duty. It's a play about routine, and it's a play that performs routine through its language. Nana Bugwu is making you experience what Nicky experiences.
That's a really sophisticated move for a 38-page independently published play.
And I think the brevity is part of the point. This is not a sprawling epic. It's compact, dense, almost compressed. Every page has to carry weight. And the fact that it's independently published, not backed by a major press, means Nabugwu got this out into the world on his own terms. There's something fitting about that, given that the play is fundamentally about people who exist outside the structures that grant recognition.
Okay, I want to push on the identity theme a bit more, because identity and non-entity is listed as one of the play's core concerns. What does non-entity mean in this context?
Non-entity is a brutal word. It means someone who is regarded as unimportant, as having no significance. And in the context of this play, it's asking, who gets to be a person? Who gets to have a name that matters? Nicky's monologue ends with a demand for recognition. My name is Nicky, and I want to be called that and be me. That's not a small ask. That's a fundamental claim to personhood.
And the fact that Nicky has to make that claim at all, that's the indictment.
Completely. Nicky is defined entirely by function. The caregiver, the watcher, the washer, the feeder. 11 children across 2 locations. The role has consumed the person, and the play is asking us to sit with that discomfort.
It's interesting because the play is categorized under fantasy on Amazon, science fiction, and fantasy, but what you're describing sounds like very grounded social realism.
Yeah, that categorization is a bit of a puzzle. My read is that the invented place names, Magaland, Little Pumpkin, Orphania, and the slightly heightened allegorical quality of the setup pushed it into that genre bucket. But the concerns are absolutely realist. Age gap marriages, caregiving labor, social judgment, the erasure of individual identity by systemic roles, these are not fantasy concerns. They're happening right now.
And that tension between the fairy tale surface and the realist core, is that intentional, do you think?
I think it has to be. The allegorical framing gives the play a kind of distance. It lets audiences engage with uncomfortable social realities without feeling directly accused. You're watching Magaland, not your own neighborhood. But the themes are close enough to home that the distance collapses pretty quickly.
That's a classic move in social satire, right? Use the fantastical to say the true thing.
Absolutely. And Poke's fun is the satirical register. The play isn't screaming at you, it's holding up a mirror and raising an eyebrow, which is often more effective than direct confrontation.
Let's talk about the contrast between the 10 children and the 1, because that numerical split, Magaland versus Little Pumpkin, feels like it's carrying a lot of meaning.
It really is. 10 children in one place, 1 child in another, and Nicky is responsible for all of them. The asymmetry is striking. Is the 1 child in Little Pumpkin the newborn from the opening? The child whose parents died? That's a reasonable reading. And if so, that child exists in a different world from the other 10, literally, geographically, symbolically.
So the 1 child might be the child of the age gap marriage, the child whose very existence triggered all the social judgment the play is critiquing.
That's a compelling reading. And it would mean that child is doubly marked, born of a controversial union, now orphaned, living in Little Pumpkin while the other 10 are in Magaland. The play is called Between Orphania and Lady Pumpkin, and that between is doing real work. Nicky exists in the space between these two worlds, holding them together.
And Orphania, with orphan in the name, that's not subtle.
Not at all. Orphania is the world of the orphaned, the abandoned, the unrecognized. And Lady Pumpkin, lady, suggests status, elevation, perhaps the world of the powerful. So the play's geography is a map of social hierarchy, and Nicky is the one who has to navigate between them every single day, 3 times a day.
Okay, I want to zoom out for a second, because we've been talking about this play as if it's a major canonical work, and it's independently published, it's 38 pages, it has 1 review on Amazon UK from someone named Renata who called it excellent book. That's the critical reception we have.
Ha, yes. And I think that's actually worth sitting with. This is not a play that has been taken up by major literary institutions. It's not on lit charts or super summary. It exists outside the structures that grant canonical recognition, which is, again, kind of fitting given what it's about.
The play about nonentity is itself a nonentity in the literary establishment.
That's a real observation. And it raises a question about who gets to be recognized, whose work gets studied, whose voice gets amplified. Nabugwu published this independently in May 2019. It's available on Amazon across multiple markets, UK, Australia, Canada, Ireland. It's out there, but it hasn't been picked up by the academic or critical apparatus that would give it wider reach.
Which is a kind of irony that the play itself would probably appreciate.
Deeply. The play is about who gets seen and who doesn't. And the play itself is, in a sense, unseen by the mainstream. There's something almost self-referential about that.
Let's go back to the themes for a second, because I want to make sure we're giving the powerful and the submissive thread its due. That's listed alongside identity and nonentity as a core concern. How does power operate in this play?
Power in this play operates through social structures, marriage, age, caregiving roles. The 75-year-old man in an age-gap marriage holds a certain kind of social power by virtue of age, presumably wealth or status. The 25-year-old wife is in a structurally submissive position, at least in the eyes of the society the play is satirizing. And then Nicky, the caregiver, is in the most submissive position of all, defined entirely by service to others.
And the play doesn't resolve that power imbalance, does it? It just holds it up.
That's the satirical mode. It doesn't offer a tidy resolution. It presents the contrast, the powerful and the submissive, the recognized and the non-entity, and asks you to sit with it. Nicky's final line is a demand, not a resolution. I want to be called that and be me. The play ends with the demand still hanging in the air.
That's actually a really powerful dramatic choice, the unresolved demand.
Because resolution would let the audience off the hook. If Nicky gets recognized and everything is fine, you leave feeling good. But if the demand is still unanswered when the lights go down, you carry it with you. That's what good social satire does. It makes the audience uncomfortable in a productive way.
And the episodic structure, the 3 acts and many scenes, does that contribute to that feeling of irresolution?
I think so. Episodic drama tends to resist the satisfying arc of traditional dramatic structure, the setup, confrontation, resolution model. Instead, it accumulates, scene after scene, contrast after contrast. And in a play about routine regime, that accumulation is the point. There's no climax that breaks the routine. The routine just continues.
Okay, here's something I keep coming back to. The play is described as being inspired by the many events associated with contrasts in society. That's a broad mandate. What kinds of contrasts are we actually talking about?
The most explicit ones are age contrast in marriage, 75 versus 25, geographic or social contrast, Magaland versus Little Pumpkin, numerical contrast, 10 children versus 1, and the contrast between identity and nonentity, being someone versus being nobody. But I think the play is also gesturing at class contrast, at the contrast between those who are cared for and those who do the caring.
The cared for versus the caregiver. That's a contrast that doesn't get enough attention.
It really doesn't. And Nicky's monologue makes it visceral. 11 children, 3 rounds of washing, feeding, watching every single day. And at the end of all that labour, Nicky has to assert the right to simply have a name. That's the contrast the play is most interested in, between the children who are cared for and recognized, and the caregiver who is invisible.
And that invisibility is the non-entity the play is talking about.
Exactly. Non-entity isn't just about being unimportant, it's about being functionally invisible, present, essential, but unrecognized. Nicky is indispensable to the survival of 11 children, and yet has to fight for the right to be called by name.
That's a theme that resonates way beyond this play. Caregiving labor, paid and unpaid, is one of the most undervalued forms of work in most societies.
And the play is making that argument through drama rather than through statistics or policy papers, which is what literature does at its best. It makes abstract social realities feel personal and immediate. You don't read Nicky's monologue and think about caregiving policy. You feel Nicky's exhaustion.
Let me ask you something that might be a bit of a challenge. The play is only 38 pages, it's independently published, it has minimal critical reception. Is it possible that we're reading more into it than is actually there?
That's a fair challenge. And I'd say the description itself from the Amazon listing is explicit about the themes. The play pokes fun at the way society reacts to age differences in marriages, the powerful and the submissive, identity and non-entity. That's not us projecting. That's the author's own framing. And Nicky's monologue, which is quoted directly in the listing, is doing exactly what I'm describing. The text supports the reading.
Fair point. The author's own description is doing a lot of the interpretive work.
And that's actually interesting in itself. Nabugwu is very clear about what the play is doing. There's no coyness about the themes, which suggests a writer who knows exactly what argument they're making and wants the audience to engage with it directly.
I want to come back to the opening crash one more time, because I think it's doing more work than it might seem. Both parents die on the way home from the hospital. The moment of new life immediately becomes the moment of death. What's that doing dramatically?
It's a brutal irony. The child is born, joy, fulfillment, dreams realized, and within the same scene, the parents are gone. It's almost like the play is saying, joy is fragile, and the social structures we build around it, marriage, family, the judgment of others, are even more fragile. The crash doesn't care about the age gap. It doesn't care about society's opinions. It just happens.
And what's left after the crash is the real subject of the play.
What's left is Nicky and the children, and the question of who takes responsibility and at what cost. The crash strips away all the social drama around the marriage and leaves the bare human reality. 11 children need care. Someone has to provide it, and that someone loses themselves in the process.
That's a really stark way to put it.
The play is stark. For all its fairy tale geography and satirical tone, the emotional core is stark. Nicky is tired, Nicky wants to be seen, and the play doesn't promise that will happen.
So when you step back from everything we've covered, the structure, the themes, the geography, Nicky's monologue, what does this play ultimately come down to?
It comes down to a question that is deceptively simple. Who gets to be a person? Not a role, not a function, not a caregiver or a wife or a husband, but a person with a name and an identity that exists independently of what they do for others. Nicky's demand, my name is Nicky and I want to be called that and be me, is the play's thesis statement. Everything else, the age gap marriage, the crash, the 10 children and the one, the contrast between Orphania and Lady Pumpkin, all of it is scaffolding for that one demand.
And the fact that Nicky has to make that demand at all, that's the indictment of the social structures the play is satirizing.
Precisely. In a world that recognized caregiving labor, that saw the people who do the invisible work of keeping others alive, Nicky wouldn't need to make that demand. The demand is necessary because the recognition isn't automatic. And that's the play's most uncomfortable truth. And it's a truth that extends well beyond the fictional world of Magaland. Completely. Think about every person who has ever been defined entirely by their role, parent, carer, worker, and had to fight for the right to be seen as something more. Nicky is a fictional character, but the experience Nicky is describing is real and widespread. That's what gives the play its resonance despite its small scale.
Here's what this really comes down to for me. Nanabugu wrote a 38-page play that is independently published, has almost no critical apparatus around it, and yet it's asking questions that are genuinely urgent. Who is seen? Who is named? Who carries the weight of others' lives and loses themselves in the process?
And the play's own existence mirrors those questions. It's a work that exists outside the structures of recognition, no major publisher, no academic study guides, no critical essays, just the text and the reader and Nicky's demand hanging in the air.
Which brings me back to where we started. A 75-year-old man, a 25-year-old wife, a newborn baby, and a crash on the way home from the hospital. The play doesn't let joy exist without immediately asking what happens when it's taken away. And the answer it gives is, someone like Nicky picks up the pieces. Every morning, every afternoon, every evening, and then asks, quietly, to simply be called by their name.
That's the play, in its entirety. And I think the reason it sticks is that the demand is so small and so enormous at the same time. A name, the right to be yourself. It shouldn't be radical. And yet the play makes clear that for Nicky, it is.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. The next time you interact with someone who is defined by their function, the carer, the worker, the person who keeps things running, ask yourself, do you know their name? Do you see them as a person or as a role? Because that's the question 10 Children and One between Orphania and Lady Pumpkin is asking. And it's asking it in 38 pages with no major publisher behind it from Middle England through a character named Nicky who just wants to be called that and be themselves. That's Co-Pilot Podcasts. We'll see you next time.